Greetings students and welcome to another Social Studies CSEC session. I am Albert Inshanali and today we will continue the conversation on regional integration. Our objectives for this session are: you should be able to define the terms globalization, trade liberalization, and trading bloc. Additionally, we should be able to discuss extra-regional factors that promote regional integration, as well as identify factors that contributed to globalization. Now, we are going to start by giving a recap of what we did last time. What is regional integration? Do you remember how we defined regional integration our last class? Well, we said regional integration involves the unification of a number of nation states into a larger whole, usually for economic purposes. In other words, developing countries and even developed countries, they realize that to be better, to have a more sophisticated or mature economy, they will unite with other countries who have similar objectives with them. So that's what regional integration is all about. We also spoke about regional factors that promote integration. And I say regional factors or intra-regional factors because these are situations or circumstances within the region that makes it quite necessary for us to promote regional integration. And some of the factors we looked at include common cultural heritage. We're very much similar in the Caribbean. We've had slavery, we had indentureship, we had colonialism. Many of the Caribbean territories experienced these very same things. A second factor we looked at when we spoke about regional integration had to do with the need to pool national markets to overcome the restrictions of limited market size. The population of many Caribbean territories, it's pretty small. It therefore means that the domestic market is small. And if we want to be able to export our products, then it therefore means we are going to have to be part of a regional entity. Also, another regional factor that promotes integration has to do with the need to increase intra-regional trade and reduce extra-regional imports. For many Caribbean territories, we produce to only satisfy our domestic market, and our import bill is pretty high. So we would like to trade more with each other instead of importing more from outside of the region. And last but not least, as Caribbean people, we definitely need to improve our standard of living because poverty is rampant and we have high unemployment rates. So these are all factors that promote regional integration. And like we said, these are regional factors or intra-regional factors because they refer to the situations, the circumstances that are part of the region. At this point in time, we will be looking at other factors that promote regional integration. But these factors have to do with what is happening outside of the region. Because the Caribbean, geographically speaking, we are very small, and population-wise, we're also small. And therefore, whatever happens within the Caribbean is greatly impacted by what happens outside of the region. And one of those extra-regional factors have to do with globalization. Yes, what is globalization? Globalization is a process that sees national economies, cultures, and societies interconnected through transportation, communication, and trade. Economic globalization is usually associated with the reduction or the removal of barriers to the flow of goods, services, capital, and labor across national boundaries. In other words, Globalization helps to make the world seem smaller in a sense. And globalization equals economic interdependence. Think about it. The clothing you wear, the food you eat, much of it comes from outside of our country. And that is as a result of globalization. National economies, cultures, societies are interrelated, interconnected. You may wonder, how is this possible? Well, we're now going to explore some causes of globalization. The first cause of globalization that we will be paying attention to is technology. The world is much smaller as a result of technology. It therefore means that we're better able to communicate with people from anywhere around the world. Think about your relatives in North America or Europe or elsewhere in the Caribbean. All you have to do is send them a message on WhatsApp, FaceTime them, send them a message on Facebook, hit them up on Instagram, and you're good to go. Similarly, businesses benefit from advanced technology. You may have a company that is headquartered in one part of the world doing business with people anywhere around the world. You could also apply to jobs around the world just by being in your home. You could probably do interviews on Zoom or using Google Meet. And that's the beauty of technology. Technology makes it so much easier for businesses to conduct business with people, clients anywhere around the world. You can also bid for a job in one country and the job is in another country. And usually the business is going to choose customers, or they're going to choose clients who can provide a service at a reduced price. And we have technology to thank for all these wonderful innovations and ease of business that we enjoy. Also, multinational corporations are responsible for globalization. When I say multinational corporations, I mean these big companies that have businesses all over the world. Think about some fast food franchises we have in Guyana. Think about KFC, Churches. What else do we have? Yes, you name them. They are all multinational corporations. It means that they have a headquarter somewhere in the world, but yet they do business everywhere else. And they are definitely one of the causes for globalization. Even with oil in Guyana, think about it. Esso Exploration and Production Guyana Limited is a multinational corporation that is based in Guyana, but it is a subsidiary of ExxonMobil. So multinational corporations, companies are found everywhere in the world, and they are responsible for globalization. Also, there is labor mobility. Many people now are leaving their home countries, their native countries, to take up employment elsewhere. Think about the brain drain that Guyana has experienced. We know so many people who have left our shores, whether they're now working in the Caribbean or in developed countries in North America or Europe. They leave and they go. And as a result of that, globalization exists. Now, we will talk about lower tariffs. Lower tariffs means that countries are now making it easier to import goods from elsewhere. When we talk about tariff, we're talking about a tax. We're talking about a tax or a duty that is paid on certain categories of imports or exports. Now, because countries are lowering their tariffs, it therefore means that it is easier for us to import goods from elsewhere in the world. Also, let's not forget improved transportation. Think about how easy it is to travel these days. You hop on a plane and you get to your destination in a matter of hours. Very much easy. But back in the day, because we relied heavily on water transportation, moving goods around the world could take months, right? In the 1800s, it took about 2 months to cross the Atlantic. Today, if you hop on a plane, it may take about 5 hours. If you use a ship, it may take less than a week. So we can see how improved transportation has greatly contributed to globalization. So we've just explored the causes of globalization. Now we'll talk about the effects of globalization. How has globalization impacted us as a region? Now, the first effect of globalization we'll talk about is a country will therefore purchase its goods and services from the cheapest source. Caribbean products on the global market are not usually cheap because the cost of production is high. As such, Caribbean countries may struggle to compete on the global market. As a result of globalization, countries have access to goods and services from anywhere in the world. What that therefore means is that if you are going to import a good into your country, then obviously you want one that is very cheap or cheaper than the others. And as a result of that, Caribbean countries may suffer because our production costs can be very, very high. Can you think of some reasons why it may be much more expensive to produce a t-shirt in the Caribbean than in the United States of America? Well, it all has to do with economies of scale, and Caribbean countries do not always achieve economies of scale. What do we mean by economies of scale? We mean cost advantages that are reaped by companies when production becomes efficient. And production becomes efficient when companies and businesses use more technology. They use machinery. They're automated. In the Caribbean, we heavily rely on labor. We rely on manual labor. So it may take 5 hours to produce a shirt in the Caribbean, whereas in the US, it may take just 1 hour or 2 hours. And that's because we rely on humans instead of technology, right? So that's one reason for not achieving economies of scale. And as a result of that, production costs can be really, really high. And it makes it very difficult for Caribbean countries to compete globally because the rest of the world is selling their products, their goods at a cheaper price than what we are able to offer. Now, on the brighter side, countries can create jobs by the inflow of direct foreign investments. The Caribbean offers few prospects in competing for foreign investors because of the lack of a variety of physical resources. And because the Caribbean, we don't have a lot of fertile land, some of these countries don't have a lot of natural resources, and as a result of that, foreign investment is usually centered around the tourism industry. But regardless of whatever industry it is, globalization makes it easier for companies, multinational companies, to invest in a Caribbean country. The second extra-regional factor we will be looking at has to do with trade liberalization. What is trade liberalization? Trade liberalization is the removal or reduction of restrictions or barriers on the free exchange of goods between nations. These barriers include tariffs, which are taxes or duty paid on imports and exports, as well as non-tariff barriers such as quotas. And when we talk about quotas, we mean how much or the level or the quantity of imports or exports that a country can be involved in. We can also say that trade liberalization is the impetus for globalization. And that is because countries realized that they could no longer depend on local industries. to produce certain goods and services. Now, one of the reasons why countries decided to adopt the idea of trade liberalization is because after the Second World War in 1945, there were many countries who were suffering economically. Poverty levels were high, unemployment levels skyrocketed as well. And these countries realized that they had to open up themselves or open up their economies to trading with the rest of the world, right? And that really is the basis of trade liberalization. Before trade liberalization, these countries adopted the principle of protectionism. And what that meant was they put a lot of emphasis on local industries. A lot of the industries were state-run industries. The means of production were owned by the state. However, they realized that they were suffering, and because of that, trade liberalization began on a larger scale, whereby there were more privatizations of industries. So what does trade liberalization mean for the Caribbean? Well, Caribbean governments are no longer able to restrict imports from outside of the region in order to protect local producers and manufacturers. In the past, Caribbean countries were able to implement high tariff costs, right? High tariff fees on imports. And what that meant was it was very difficult for you to import goods from overseas, from foreign countries, because the tariffs would be so high. Now, because of trade liberalization, Caribbean countries are no longer able to impose high tariff costs to imports. So it therefore means we have a lot of foreign goods flooding our market. If you go to the supermarket, if you look at the shelves, most of what we have come from overseas. And that is because the tariff levels are no longer high. If that is the case, and we cannot really do much about it as a country because we subscribe to different policies by the World Trade Organization, how then do we protect local economies? How do we protect our local industry? It therefore means that next time you go to a supermarket or you go and buy an item of clothing, then it might be best to purchase something that was produced locally, produced in your country or produced in the region. And that is one way as consumers we will be able to protect local industries. Another extra-regional factor that promotes regional integration has to do with trading blocs. What is a trading bloc? A trading bloc is basically a group of countries trading among themselves. Guyana is part of a trading bloc. We're part of CARICOM. We're part of the Caribbean community. We're part of the single market economy. Right? And many countries decide to be part of trading blocs because trade blocs tend to deal with other trading blocs. It may be very difficult for a small island in the Caribbean to negotiate and bargain with a developed country. The developed country may have an edge over that small island. But if that small island is part of a trading bloc, then that small island could negotiate and bargain for better deals, right? And it also makes business easier. It makes business easier. It's less time consuming when larger countries who are part of trading blocs trade or do business with other trading blocs. Can you think of any major trading bloc in the world? Yes, the European Union, which is made up of many countries in Europe, is a major trading bloc. We also have Mercosur in South America, which is also another trading bloc. Another extra regional factor that promotes regional integration has to do with the dreaded natural disasters that we experience in the region. The Caribbean is vulnerable to natural disasters on a scale that can have a devastating effect on a society and an economy. A country is unlikely to be able to overcome the problems caused by such disasters alone, and the recognition of this need for cooperation should encourage moves to integration. Now, within the Caribbean region, there is an agency that assists countries who are devastated or impacted by natural disasters. And this agency is called the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. It's a regional intergovernmental agency for disaster management within CARICOM. So countries can rely on this agency to assist them, especially with rebuilding, especially with emergency efforts immediately after a natural disaster. The last extra regional factor that we will be looking at that promotes regional integration has to do with economic shocks. The countries of the Caribbean are vulnerable to economic shocks, which are unexpected or unpredictable events from outside an economy that affect that economy. An example might be a sudden or dramatic fall in demand for a particular product or a rapid rise in price for a basic commodity such as oil. Speaking of oil, as a result of the pandemic, many countries had oil just sitting there. The oil was not being sold. Why? Because there was a reduce in transportation. And as a result of that, fuel and gasoline and diesel and all of that were not being sold at a level these countries normally expect them to be. And what we find is that countries cannot really control what happens as a result of economic shocks. Think about the United States in 2008. The United States had a recession, which was a temporary economic decline. People did not spend as before, and it greatly impacted the countries in the Caribbean because many countries in the Caribbean depend on tourism. And what we found was that many workers in the tourism industry, they lost their jobs because tourists were not flocking the islands like before. So you see, sometimes we are at the mercy of what happens elsewhere in the world. At this time, students, I would love to test your knowledge. Based on everything that we've learned about regional integration, whether during this session or the previous session, I would like to know what you remember and what you understand. As such, we'll be looking at some multiple choice questions. The first question, regional integration is it A, a process in which countries around the world agree to trade with each other? Is it B, a process in which neighboring nation states agree to work closely together to achieve stated goals? Is it C, countries of North America, South America, and Central America working together to achieve common goals? Or is it D, none of the above? What do you think? Now let us remember that the key word there is regional integration. So we're speaking about countries within a geographical region like the Caribbean. So would it be a process in which countries around the world? When we look at the term around the world, does that correspond with what we mean by regional? Of course not. Around the world could be anywhere around the world. But regional has to do with specific countries within a geographical location. Is it B, a process in which neighboring nation states agree to work closely together to achieve stated goals? Neighboring nation states. Think about that. If you're neighbors with each other, does it mean you're part of a region? Yes, more than likely, you're within the same region. So I would go with B as the correct answer. Is there anyone who went with C? C specifically spoke about countries that are in North America, South America, and Central America. Does that mean regional integration does not care about countries in the Caribbean or in Asia or Europe or Africa? Of course not. C is too specific. Regional integration, it doesn't matter where these countries are, but as long as they are close to each other in terms of geographical location. So the answer there is B. Our next question. What is one of the main driving principles fueling the thrust towards regional integration in the Caribbean? What is one of the main driving principles fueling the thrust towards regional integration in the Caribbean? Is it A, the existence of competition between Caribbean countries? Is it B, similar cultural backgrounds? Is it C, working towards attainment of sustainable development? Is it D, the accomplishments of the West Indian Cricket Board? What is the main driving principle? Why do we integrate regionally? Did you say A, the existence of competition between Caribbean countries? Do you think we would want to compete with Caribbean countries if we're integrating? No, the purpose of integration is for cooperation, not competition with each other, but competition with the rest of the world. So we will not say A. Is it similar cultural background? Yes, we have similar cultural backgrounds. We have we have the same music we love, the similar foods that we consume, but that's not the main reason for regional integration. Is it C, working towards attainment of sustainable development? Yes, that's it. Sustainable development. We want to ensure that our economies meet our needs and future generations as well. We want to have a sophisticated and mature economy. So the answer there is C. What about D? Did anybody say the accomplishments of the West Indian Cricket Board? What accomplishments? I'm just kidding, right? Cricket, yes, is definitely a part of why we integrate regionally, but it's not the main reason. The main reason would be C. Which of the following is not a multilateral agreement? Which of the following is not a multilateral agreement? Is it A, fishing protocol between Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago? Is it B, the Treaty of Bastille? Is it C, the Charter of the United Nations? Or is it D, the Treaty of Chaguaramas? Now let's say you don't know what any of these options are, or what they refer to, or what they mean. Then it therefore means we have to use our context clues. Look at the question. Spend some time looking at the question. Sometimes students, they hurry to look for the options that they don't spend time to understand the question. The question is telling us about what is a multilateral agreement. What do we understand by the prefix multi or multi? Multi means many. If I say you're multi-talented, you have many talents. So a multilateral agreement would have to be an agreement that has to do with many, and in this case, many countries. Now, which one is not an agreement that has to do with many countries? Is it the Treaty of Bastille? Bastille has to do with the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. The Charter of the United Nations have to do with many countries that are part of the United Nations. The Treaty of Chaguaramas has to do with the 15 member states of CARICOM. But again, if we don't know what these treaties are or what they refer to, let us look at the word multilateral, which has to do with many. So one that is not a multilateral agreement would be a fishing protocol between Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago, because we're speaking about two countries, not many. And what do we call an agreement with two countries? Yes, we say that is a bilateral agreement. Bi meaning two. So the answer here would be A. Tariffs are, is it A, a particular brand of food? Is it B, the name given to custom officials? Is it C, import and export taxes which are placed on goods? Or is it D, importing and exporting of goods? We used the term tariffs before. What do you think? Did you say a particular brand of food? Do you know any brand of food that goes by the name tariff? I certainly don't. Is it a name given to custom officials? Is that a title that we give to people? Do we say people are tariffs? No. Is it import and export taxes which are placed on goods? Yes. When we speak about tariffs, we are talking about those taxes, those duties that are placed on goods that are imported or exported. So the answer there is C. And it cannot be, because importing and exporting of goods is what we call trading or trade. So that would not be what tariffs are. Therefore, the correct answer is C. Which one of the following is a regional factor that promotes integration? Which one is a regional factor? Meaning a situation or a circumstance within the Caribbean region that promotes integration. Is it A, globalization? Is it B, trade liberalization? Is it C, economic shocks? Or is it D, common cultural heritage? Which one is a regional factor? Globalization is what we would call an extra-regional factor because it affects all of us, regardless of where you are in the world. Trade liberalization, similarly, has to do with an extra-regional factor. It affects everyone around the world. Economic shocks, again, is an extra-regional factor because the economy of a developed country can greatly impact the economies of Caribbean territories. So all of these options have to do with things that happen outside of the region that may influence what happened among us. So the correct answer there would be D, common cultural heritage. Because we're so similar as a people, it's easier for us to unite and integrate regionally. Trade liberalization means, is it A, shops can open 24 hours a day? Is it B, goods can be sold at any price? Is it C, goods can be freely traded across national boundaries? Or is it D, regulations on product labeling are removed? Look at the term trade liberalization. Trade has to do with imports and exports. What comes to mind when you think of liberal? It has to do with the loosening or having less restrictions. So trade liberalization means there are less restrictions to trading, or what we call freer trade. If you say A, that has nothing to do with trading. If shops open 24 hours a day, then that's a matter of convenience and not a matter of trade liberalization. Is it B, goods can be sold at any price? Again, it also depends on the business owner. He could also regulate the prices of his goods and not necessarily be as a result of trade liberalization. Is it C, goods can be freely traded across national boundaries? That sounds like it, right? Yes, I would think so. Goods can be freely traded across national boundaries. In a country, out of country, goods moving all over the world. That's what trade liberalization is all about. Did you say regulations on product labeling are removed? Do you think that's a good thing? Of course not. We need product labeling to know what we're buying, to know what the ingredients are, and all of that. So the answer here is C. All of the following are functions of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency except A. Formulating disaster management plans, assisting member states when security issues arise, providing assistance in rebuilding in times of disaster, disseminating information to member states with respect to severe weather conditions. All of these are functions of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency except which one? Now, if you don't really know much about the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, you don't know much about it, then look at the name, because the name of that agency gives us a clue as to what that agency does. It has to do with disaster, as the name indicates. It has to do with emergency. It has to do with management. So look at your choices and see whether those key terms are found in your choices. And if those key terms are not found in a particular choice, then maybe that may be the answer. So let's look at A. Formulating disaster management plans. Do you think that sounds like something this agency would do? Yes, this agency is all about disaster management. Assisting member states when security issues arise. Security issues have to do with disasters and emergencies. Security doesn't really come to mind. So let's pause and look at the others, and then we'll go back to security. Is it C? Providing assistance in rebuilding in times of disaster. Yes, we're all about disaster and providing assistance. So C is definitely a function. What about D? Disseminating information to member states with respect to severe weather conditions. Weather conditions, severe weather conditions have a lot to do with potential disasters. So I would say D is also a function. So the obvious choice here would be B, assisting member states when security issues arise. If you want to protect your borders from invasion or from threats outside of the region, then you'll need a different agency to deal with that. Thank you, students, for being a part of another episode on regional integration. Do take care until next time.